Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. I can see in the list some friends, some others I don't know, but I'm going to present myself. My name is Giorgio Rosati. I'm Senior Product Manager here in Italy, Tecniplast Italy, for the DigiLab line, including obviously DVC and DVC Analytics. Together with me this afternoon, there is Stefano Gaburro, who is our neuroscientist, the scientific director, taking care of the scientific part of this important DVC project, supporting you to exploit the most from this technology. Welcome to this DVC Analytics webinar. The session is recorded and will be shared later in the coming days. If you have any question in between I'm presenting, Stefano, obviously please pose your question, make your question, and Stefano will reply. Otherwise, we can have a look at the open question at the end of this webinar that should last more or less 1 hour. So I go straight to the point by sharing I switch off the camera for the meantime to save bandwidth, and I share my screen, and I go straight to the DVC Analytics interface. Most of you, and I hope all of you, should be aware of this interface. Basically, this is the login of the system. Once after entering username and password, we will discuss immediately how to get this. This is the login page. We are now inside one of our partner here in Italy, institute called the Mario Negri. We use this institute for running some tests and some prototypes and validate. So it's a good site for us to play with and show you the different functionalities. During this hour of training session or webinar, I would like to cover the two most important parts. Very quickly, the administrative workflows, explaining you how to register a new user, how to share cages, and so on. Most of the time, these are very important questions, especially at the beginning of using the DVC Analytics. Second part, probably the longer and the most important, we will focus more on the data analysis part, showing you in details the different aspects and functionalities of the system. I also prepared, as you can see from the bottom of my screen, a supportive DVC Analytics presentation. I will switch from the interface to the presentation to complement what I'm saying. So let's start immediately from, as said, by the administrative part of the analytics. If you're in someone us, we should have already invited you in the sense that we have already created your user and you access to the interface. You are, and currently I am a facility manager as a role in the DVC Analytics, and I can invite as many new users as I want. There is no limitation in the DVC Analytics once you are allowed to use the platform to invite other people. How to do so? You have to click this button, User Settings, and you see you are opening a different section with more buttons. The one now I'm referring to invite other user is this one, DVC Analytics Users. By clicking this, this is the current list of already existing DVC Analytics users previously created in the Mario Negri Institute. And you can see that there is the username of the people, name and surname, their role. what's the status, if it is enabled or disabled. In case a user is leaving, you can easily disable and this user will not have access anymore. And the last time this user accessed the system. As you can see immediately from this column, the role column, there are basically two roles: facility manager, and currently I am a facility manager, or researcher. Let's focus on this in a while. But before this, I clearly show you, hopefully, how to invite a new user. There is a green button here. You click the green button, and then simply you have to type. Now I'm typing, for instance, let's do Stefano. Stefano.gaburro@tecniplast.it. Just typing the invitation email for the user and selecting a role. As said, two roles, facility and researcher. If I click facility and I confirm, Stefano will receive an email. Following the workflow of the email, Stefano can add the username, the password, and also the recovery mail that could be exactly the same used for invitation or could be also another one. It's important to fill the recovery mail because in case you forget the password, the user forgets the password, this will be used to recover the email. Exactly the same workflow. If I click researcher as a role, again, Stefano will be invited, in this case as a researcher. And you will see immediately that researcher has obviously limited functionalities or limited access, not really functionalities are the same, but the access to specific cages only, while the facility manager is accessing any cage in the facility, created in the facility. So by doing so, an email has been just sent to Stefano. And Stefano, please, in the meantime, register following the email workflow, and we will double check later about Stefano registration. I want now to switch, as said, to my presentation, just to providing you a little bit more understanding of these two roles. When I enter as a facility manager, as just shown a few minutes ago, I have access to all the different buttons: data analysis, experiment, download, and user settings. If I enter as a researcher, vice versa, the user setting button is not enabled. What's inside the user setting? You have just seen the content. By clicking the user setting, there is the analytics user invitation, as just shown, and there are other buttons we are now going to cover immediately. Intuitively, so if you are a manager, you can invite as many users as you want. If you have been invited as a researcher, you can only access the cages and you can only perform an analysis without accessing, without inviting any other user. I hope this slight but very, very important difference is clear now between the two roles. As said, when you are, where is my mouse? When you are a researcher, you have limited access to only specific cages that a manager, a facility manager user role has enabled to you. It works in this way. There is a specific button called DVC Cage Owner Association. By clicking this button as a manager, because only the facility manager can access this button, I have full access to the long list of cage owners created in the DVC operator interface in the DVC animal room, push it to the analytics, and now these cage owners, whatever you created, can be binded, can be linked to an already existing analytics user, and even more researcher role analytics user. For instance, I don't know, Stefano, let's have a look if Stefano registered in the meantime. Sorry, Stefano, for chasing you. Not yet, Stefano. In any case, let's find another one. When you click DVC Cage Owner Association, you can select one already existing cage owner created in the animal room, and you can bind this owner to an already existing researcher role in the analytics. This is the only way. Here it comes, Stefano. So now Stefano, as a researcher, can access only those cages that have been created in the animal room where the cage owner is assigned as, in this case, Piccirillo. Stefano cannot access any other cage than this one. This is the way to be sure the researcher can only access their own specific cages and not other cages, while as a facility manager, I can access everything, as you can see. This is the primary user associated to the cage owner. In these last few months, we enabled another functionality called the secondary owner, secondary DVC Analytics user. Basically, you can add more than one as a secondary DVC Analytics user. You can add this to access the Piccirillo as a cage owner cages. This is also, for instance, I can add multiple DVC Analytics user to access the same cages prepared in the DVC animal room, where the cage owner in the DVC animal room is the Piccirillo. In the coming weeks, we will have also the DVC operator webinar where we explain carefully how to do this creation. But in essence, you create a cage in the animal room, you assign Piccirillo as an owner, and then this cage will be visible to Stefano as a primary user, plus as many secondary user you bind to this cage owner. Probably more complex to explain than to do it. We will see at the end of the webinar if I was enough clear to explain. Hopefully, yes. So this is the first very important part of the administrative settings. So analytics inviting and associating researcher to cage owner. Then, as you can see, there are also very quickly some other very basic settings. Unit of measure, where for each metric you select which is the corresponding unit of measure you want to have. Very, very simple. Or facility settings, and this is a little bit probably even more important, where you can set the dark period of your facility. So when the lights, for instance, are switched off and switched on in the morning, what is your time zone, and what is the starting day of the week. Usually Monday, for some countries could be also Sunday. Last point is the user group that seems to be similar to the cage owner association, but in reality is is a little bit different. User group works in this way. You can create as many as you want. Let's do it as a test, for instance. So let's create a new group called the test George. Test webinar, even better. Who is the owner? It's me now as administrative Tecniplast user. And now I can select which user, analytics user, can access which cages. So I can say, for instance, Stefano, and then Torben, one of our German colleague, and then Gianpaolo, for instance, our vet. So really 3 independent entities can access what? These specific cages, and I can select from the list of currently 1,739 existing cages in the Mario Negri Institute, at least registered in the past. Could be also terminated, could be running. For instance, I know there are only 3 running. So let's assume these 3 cages currently running in Mario Negri Institute by clicking confirm now are available for the 3 users I mentioned. I forgot to click probably confirm. Sorry. Gianpaolo and Torben. So now Stefano, Torben, and Gianpaolo can access these 3 cages independently if these cages have a specific cage owner, if this cage owner has been associated to a specific user. This is a static, I would say, association. These 3 people, these 3 cages, full stop. The big difference with the other cage owner association is that whatever new cage you are going to create with Piccirillo as a cage owner in the future, automatically will be enabled and made accessible to Stefano as a primary user and all the other as a secondary user. Again, probably a little bit more difficult to explain than to do it. Let's see later if I was clear enough. So these are the most important administrative part. As said, let's focus on the second, probably even more, obviously, most important part of the DVC Analytics, the data analysis button. So by clicking this button, step number 1, immediately the system is showing you the already saved configuration from the past. Let's skip it for a while. I will explain you later on what I mean when I say configuration. If I want to start from scratch a completely new analysis, I have to click this button, New Analysis. Now, there is a very simple rule of thumb for the DVC Analytics workflow. Whenever you find a orange triangle, a small orange warning, I would say, triangle, it means that there is a field that must be cleared, must be solved, and the system cannot proceed more because this point must be addressed. Now, by entering into the new analysis, step number 1 for the system, otherwise cannot proceed, is to select the cages you want to analyze. So without cages, you cannot progress to the other steps. And this is the reason why now we have this triangle. So how to select cages? Click this button where the triangle is located. And on the side, on the right side, the long list of cages registered in the system terminated already, out of rack, or currently running, and running, as I said, there are only 3, are displayed. Probably, if you are attending this DVC Analytics webinar, you already know that the DVC works by cage ID. It's a mandatory field. In reality, we can do exactly the same analysis and search by looking at mice ID, animal ID. You see here in this top section, you can select items by looking for cage IDs or animal IDs. We don't like to use the we don't like too much to use the analytics by animal ID, because this is not the way the DVC works. The DVC, the unit of measure of the DVC is the cage. So you can still search by animal ID, but please consider that if there are multiple animals in the same cage, you select 2 animals in the same cage, obviously the data we are referring to are exactly the same. The data referring to animals are the data referring to the cage. So if it is useful for you to find cages, please use the animal ID. But if you already know the cage ID, please stay with the cage selection, because it's much more logical by using the DVC. We will check later if this is clear. So if I was clear enough to explain this part, or at least our preference. So by clicking this button, I said a new window is opening where you can search and filter cages by typing your cage ID, if you like. You can filter, for instance, let's have a look. I said that there are only 3 currently running cages. 3 running cages I can show you in Mario Negri DVC system. These are the 3. Now I entered in the DVC operator interface, looking in real time in the animal room, which are the registered cages, and these are the only 3 currently in the DVC system. Back into the analytics, these are the 3. Or you can filter by, I don't know, the out of the rack, and so on. There are many cages out of the rack, or just terminated, or terminated in the past. This is the long list. In the DVC, cages can be created as a stock cages, experimental cages, and breeding cages, same filter. In the DVC, you can assign a specific study protocol. By default, is assigned the DVC default protocol, and so on. If you select an experimental cage, you can also set the experiment ID, the experimental group. This is also very important. If the cage is an experimental cage in the DVC, you can also include add-ons, running wheel, black cages, LED as a lighting system, and this will appear in this big filter, big table, and you can filter by cage add-on. When the cage has been registered, it could be useful for you to refer to a specific time in the past, which is or which was the position in which rack, how many animals, and who is the owner of this cage, the one we used for instance, before we already explained for the DVC Analytics Association. Every time you create a cage in the DVC system with a specific cage owner, this is appearing in the DVC Analytics. In this case, it's just a list. In the previous functionality, we also use it to link to an already existing analytics user. Let's focus on the running cages. So I have to clear this invalid status. I can select one cage, and automatically the system is providing me the starting point, the starting time for this specific case when the first data point has been sent to the analytics. In this case, is the 19th of June that correspond obviously to the registration date, as you can see. The stop of the analysis is automatically set to today by default. These are calendars. You can filter better the analysis depending on the period of analysis you want to perform. I know, for instance, that this case, if I'm not wrong, let's have a look at the end, should have been used for a while, then stopped, and then again last week or so. So I've just modified the starting point of the analysis as 18th of September. Now you see there are still some triangle. I cannot download the data because the system doesn't know what is the aggregation, for instance, yet. I cannot even visualize the data because the system doesn't know which metric I want to apply to this cage. In fact, you see that the second step of the workflow is the metric and it has a triangle. It's time to click. Let's keep it simple for now by selecting only one cage. Then we will be back later. So step number 2 is to select a metric. As you can see, we have multiple metrics, even some very, very new. Sorry that there are no icons in the fighting like stereotypy buttons, but because just released today for showing you in this webinar, you will get this fighting like metric, a stereotypic metric really in these coming days, if you already have a DVC Analytics, as I believe. Let's keep it simple, and I want just to select one metric, animal locomotion index smoothed in this case. If I click the button, then this other advanced, I would say, selection is appearing where I can select if I want to see only specific electrodes from this animal locomotion index metric. Usually, I would say the default by considering the type board is fine. If I want to select the metric, you don't have to press the button, but you have to check and click this checkbox. So must be green as it is right now. Again, let's keep it simple to go straight to the visualization. In reality, as you can see, I can already click the visualize button because other parameters are set by default. But let's have a look, following the same workflow, what are the other parameters. Clicking on the chart section, by default, we select the line chart as a simple line, continuous simple line. You see that by clicking the different buttons, and these are not like the checkbox before, but these are more exclusive button, one or the other. I cannot select, I show you quickly on the metrics, multiple metrics as before. In the chart, you can only select one chart type, or at least one chart at time. Let's stay simple, as said, line and continuous, and then we will deepen very quickly the others. And then following, again, what is the aggregation period? By default, the hour. This really depends on you. If the analysis you are performing is very short, probably the minute can be fine if it is 1 day, couple of days. But if you're running more than a couple of days, probably the hour is fine. If it is longer, could be days, could be weeks. Aging studies, many times we use it also weeks as an aggregation opportunity. Last but not least, in case you want to have a custom aggregation, for instance, I know a customer who's using 10 minutes as aggregation time, every analysis they perform. You can customize in this way. simply by clicking and then selecting. Let's keep it simple. There are other filters, aggregation, and there is no possibility to click diurnality because of the metrics and the chart selected. So some buttons are available or are enabled, disabled depending on the previous choices, as well as for the starting point of the analysis. This is a continuous line, so there is no need to explain that I want to have the starting point of the data visualization at day start or lights on, at midnight or lights on, because it's a continuous line. We will use these starting point filters later. Last, or the one before the last, the events. Usually I like, especially in the continuous line, to see also the DVC generated events. We have as a DVC generated events the registration of the cage, the removal from the rack, the insertion in the rack, the bedding change, and the cage update in case you modify the number of animals by adding or removing animals to the cage, and the termination, obviously. These are the automatically generated DVC events while you are using DVC in the animal room. These events are pushed to the DVC Analytics. The background, by default, there is no background. You remember when we set a few minutes ago in the settings, the dark period as 7 p.m., 7 a.m. If I click this, I see this background overlaid to the data. In case you have also an RIM device, that is the small device attached to the top of the rack, this device is also collecting light, real environmental condition, if it is dark, if it is on, as well as other environmental parameters, the noise in the usable range, relative humidity, and so on. I don't remember, honestly, if in Mario Negri there is the RIM. Let's keep it simple for now. We can check later. Last button, the time filtration. Should I completely display and visualize the entire daylight and dark period, or I want to display only the daylight period or only the dark? Keep it simple, no filtration. In case there is a selection on the daylight and dark period, instead of having fragmented lines, at least graphically, you can also decide to interpolate or realign depending on your choice. You know me now, keep it simple and don't select any time filtration. So just very quickly recapping, we select one cage for some days. I requested the animal locomotion index smoothed as a metric to analyze, simple line continuous, aggregated by hour, showing the DVC events, no time filtration. Both buttons, visualize and download, are now clean and available. If I click visualize, now this is a request to the cloud for running this job. And immediately the system replied back, sending the corresponding data for the animal locomotion index smoothed in the period, you remember, from the 18th of September till yesterday, because I selected 26 midnight, meaning few at the beginning of today, plus all the DVC events occurred for this cage while it has been manipulated in the animal room. So it's been removed at 10:23 of 19 of September, and it has been inserted 7 minutes later, as you can see from the tooltip on the green cage. And again, for all the different situation. Probably, let's have a look. The 21 and 22nd, these were Saturday, Sunday, and as you can see, there were no movements, no removal and insertion of this cage. This is the reason why on day 3 and day 4 you don't see any DVC events. This is the way of working at, for instance, Mario Negri. The shadow are the dark period, and the lines obviously are the corresponding animal locomotion index smoothed metric. Let's go back. This is the simplest approach. One cage and you do the analysis. Obviously, the analytics can provide you much more. Let's start from the first part. You can have multiple cages as a group. So, for instance, running exactly the same, but now I make just a quick other selection to show you advanced results. I select the chart line and then instead of simple, the standard error of the mean, continuous, and then I keep all the other as the same settings. Now the system is basically creating the group for these 3 cages as a unique group, and then also showing you in the interface, in the visualization of the data, the standard error of the mean just asked. As you can see now, there are more events because in reality, these events are related to the group itself, not just to the individual cage, but to multiple cages belonging to the group. Let's go back to the group. If you want to see the different events in a different way that is not the timeline, as you can see, there is also a button called event here. By clicking the event, the 3 cage IDs, cage ID number 5, cage ID number 3, cage ID number 1.d10 are displayed. 115 events for the first cage. If I click, these are all the inserted, remove from the beginning of the usage of this cage. That was, you remember, the 19th of June. And so on for all the others. These are all the events registered for the 3 cages. I can, instead of selecting a date, for instance, this could be also useful. Sometimes I can also select an event to start the analysis. So instead of the 18, let's select the 19 insertion at, in this case, it was 10, if I read carefully. Let's have a look on the 9. No, it was the other cage. The 19 at 10:30. This is becoming the new starting point for the analysis. If I click visualize, it goes again in this way. You don't see, this is important to understand, you don't see the absolute interval of time. In this case, sorry, made a mistake. The analysis starts from midnight. If I click 10:30, it will start from 10:30. Then we repeat also with the event. Here it comes. This is the absolute interval of time of the analysis. As said, you can easily adjust. By clicking minutes, you enable the minute. If you stay on the day, it will start at midnight. I made a mistake because I selected the event without selecting the minutes. My fault, sorry. This is a way to group, but in reality, you can also create multiple groups to compare. Let's do in this way. I know there were other cages, if I'm not mistaken, belonging to Milite as an owner. Yes. And let's try to add these 3 cages, for instance. So now the system is helping me to make a comparison between 2 groups. Group 0, the first group with 3 cages, and the second group with other 3 cages. Now, this is an important part I want to carefully explain you. You can realign the analysis between within groups by using different buttons. I use my slides again to explain you better how to do it. Alignment. F5. Sorry. I skip all this part just to be quick. My mistake. Here it is. Alignment. This is, let's assume this is a real situation. You have 3 groups. Within each group, you have 3 cages. And these 3 cages have been created in a absolute timeline in different moment of the experiment. So let's assume cage number 1 in this period of time, then cage number 2 few days after, while you also prepared cage number 4 and so on. You see, these are shifted in the temporal line. This is the reality. And then you can realign this reality to make comparison between and within groups in 3 different ways, basically. You can realign by groups, and basically the starting point of any group becomes the same for all the 3 groups. And these are realigned to a relative day 0, but you keep within the group the same shifted distribution. So it is only realigning the starting of each group to day 0. Then there is the second type of realignment, that is the alignment by resources. And basically, it realigns the 3 groups to day 0 plus the internal cages within each group to day 0. This is on one side very powerful because you can, especially for longitudinal studies where cages belonging to the same group have been created in different time, different period in time, you can really realign the group and consider the group as a whole. But you have to take care that the day 0, the realignment is the date you set. So if you realign a cage to start being analyzed from 10 a.m. in the morning, and another cage that have been created in the afternoon, and you click these resources realignment, will be moved to the relative day 0, but this will be 4 in the afternoon as a day 0. So you are comparing 10 a.m. from the first cage with 4 p.m. of the second cage. So you have to handle this bad in time realignment, and there is a way. I show you immediately how to fix this, because otherwise, obviously, it's wrong. You will end up on making a group or even comparison in a wrong time, relative time approach. Third realignment, that is a not realignment approach. Cages are left as they are, groups are left as they are, and there is no realignment, no movement of the data points. Simply the analysis is performed when the first cage data are appearing. So these are the 3 different types you can find here. Alignment by group, alignment by resources, alignment none, meaning leaving everything as it is. Let's have a look if I selected good cages? No, I was bad. Sorry. So let's do very, very quickly in this way. I select an already existing configuration, and I immediately explain you how to do it, where that it's easier for me to explain, where I have 6 groups, even more than what I was creating a few minutes ago. 6 group, 1 cage each. Let's stay simple, only the animal locomotion index, the line, continuous, aggregated by hour, DVC events, nothing more, nothing more. All the 6, or I prefer just to show you better, sorry, the facility darkness. These are the 6 different cages selected in the group, simultaneously showed as individual cages, all together, one over the other. If vice versa, and this is because my original selection was 1 by 1. As said, we can also create, for instance, these cages are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1D10. So let's create a group with 2, cage number 2. There are many with 2. Registration date, let's filter out. So was from June. Let's do it this way. Here it is. So cage number 2 is in. Cage number 3, here it is. Cage number 4. Now what I'm creating is the corresponding group of the entire individually displayed cages earlier. 6 and 1D10. Here it is. So I just quickly recreated this group of 6 cages that are the 6 cages you also see individually created here. This is a nice tip. If you want, for instance, to see, let's remove this filter. If you want to see which are the cages I just selected, there is a button here, show the selected, and the system only filter out all the others and show you what you have selected. Same for the other. So this was the 1D10 and so on. I also named properly the field, so it was easier for me to find. Let's visualize again. Now we have a group that is this one, group 0, that is the 6 cages simultaneously displayed. Now I'm also doing another thing on the graph. I am, here it is, switching off the different individual cages, and this is the only line corresponding to the overall group of the 6 cages. This is also a nice functionality. Usually, you know what I do? I do like this. I create, for instance, the group. I click the little star, and then I click this button and I say delete all the other groups that are not the preferred one. So it stays only the original group of six cages. Sorry. Now I'm doing from the opposite way. If I want to compare this group, now if I click visualize, obviously now there is only this group appearing, not anymore the other 6 cages. Sorry, I made a too long selection. Let's go back to the 18th of September. So this is the only group of 6 cages. If I want to clone and then split, I am back to the previous situation where I have the overall group with 6 cages plus the individual cages. This is very, very convenient, especially when you want to find for specific outlier within the group you want to analyze better by showing also the individual cages of the group itself. I told you, what about, let's go back just considering the group. What about resources when the cages have been registered in a different time interval? This is a very advanced functionality. Basically, when you click resources, you have to click settings, and you can set, if I enable the minute, even better, you can set what is the current starting point of the realignment performed within the group. Now, these cages, as you can see from this list, have been registered, all of them on the 5 of them on 19th of June, one was on the 18th of June. But let's assume they were registered in different intervals. You can really realign each starting point to the period you want. And our suggestion obviously is to realign or to the midnight, that it's simpler, by leaving the date as a days, or if you enable the minutes, you have to select, at least in our vision, the same minute for all cages, because this will not impact the realignment compared to the circadian rhythm. You don't have to realign a cage, as said, starting at 10 with a cage starting at 4. They should start both of them at 10 or 4 to be realigned. Otherwise, the group will be created with data belonging to different interval of the circadian pattern. And this is the way, this is the point where you select the different cage by cage starting time for this internal realignment within the group. Again, probably much difficult to explain for me than to do. What else I want to, time as usual is running very fast. I want to explain you in details. The metrics, as said, we have several metrics. The animal locomotion index. Animal locomotion index is a metric explaining how much activity is performed in the cage. The unit of measure is an arbitrary unit, and basically it really correlates a lot with the activity. If they don't move, animal locomotion is 0. If they move, animal locomotion increase as much as they move. Very, very correlated. The mathematical formula is this one. Basically, every time there is a drop of the signal due to the movement over one or multiple electrons, we count this as activation. We count the activation in the period selected. We divide by the number of selected electrodes, by the number, we normalize by the number of samples, and these represent an arbitrary unit between 0 and 100%. 100% is impossible to reach, meaning every data sample, the animal should move over all the 12 electrodes. What you get is always something in between 0, no activity, and 10, 20, 15%. That is a reasonable value when you have multiple mice inside of the cage, especially in the nocturnal period. Animal tracking distance, vice versa, it is enabled only when the animals are individually housed. We can reconstruct the trajectory, therefore the distance performed by the unique mouse in the cage, as well as for the speed. Bedding status index is a metric for the analysis of the bedding, the moisture into the bedding, flooding or moisture in general. Fighting like what you're going to get very, very soon. I show you by using this slide. Basically, it represents minute by minute the value we assign it to the data point based on our AI algorithm. Every minute generated of data generated by the DVC is ingested, is sent to a convolutional neural network, an AI algorithm, and the outcome of this algorithm is nothing, so normal minute, no fighting, no stereotypic, or this most likely is a stereotypic minute, or this is most likely a fighting minute. By enabling this metric, the fighting metric, fighting like metric, basically you have minute by minute or aggregated by hour, by day, by weeks, the number of fighting like, if any, detected in the period of selection. Exactly the same for the stereotypy metric. Then we have also some advanced metrics like RDI, calculated in the dark phase or in the light phase, where we consider the 12 hours of light and the 12 hours in this case of daylight. We calculate this metric again by using my slides. RDI means regularity disruption index, and this metric captures the regular animal activity pattern. It's a mathematical formula called the sample entropy. Basically, if the animals in their, especially in the circadian pattern, in the daylight or dark period, they rest and awake, very, very regular activity, the RDI is 0. If they start having a very irregular awake and resting phases, meaning the activity is not really regular, this RDI increases. We discovered and we validated with several papers, especially in neurodegenerative disease studies, there is a circadian disruption and there is an irregular pattern, especially during the daylight, that can be captured by this RDI, showing a statistical difference between control animals and disease animals, as well as comparing with the previous preclinical phase versus the clinical one. It's a very, very interesting digital biomarker used in most of our neurodegenerative studies. Last but not least, that is very, very simple, the running wheel. If you provide the running wheel, this but inside the cage, this will generate data, and this data can be displayed as a distance, rotation, or speed in the analytics. Let's keep it animal locomotion index, my preferred. And then as a chart, there are many. Also, we like a lot the heat map to perform a very qualitative assessment at the beginning of any analysis. As you can see, when I click at the heat map, some buttons appear at the triangle, meaning that we cannot progress. I cannot visualize. I have to fix these issues by going there. So what is the issue? The issue is that the heat map requires to set when the data should be displayed, from midnight or from lights on. This is your choice. Usually I like midnight, but this is just personal preferences. But then there is also another triangle here that is stopping me to visualize or even download. That is the events, because in the heat map chart, I cannot display the events. I have to unselect this section. I cannot display the darkness, the background bars, because there are no timeline, so I have to select none. Now, again, all the triangles have been cleared. I can visualize, but I want to aggregate data by minute because this is very informative in the heat map as a visual representation. Now I can run, and now the system is downloading, is requesting and then downloading the animal locomotion index minute by minute. It takes just a little because it goes for 6 cages minute by minute, several days. But after a while, should stop and display. Here it comes. And as you can see, this is a colored approach of the data. These are exactly the same data showed before by using the line continuous simple chart. This is the heat map where each line corresponds to 24 hours, starting from midnight because this was my selection, where blue means most likely zero activity. You see zero is the dark blue, while the red is the peak of activity, 20% of activity. Everything in between is everything in between 0 and 20% in terms of activity. Usually, let's do, no, usually what I do, sorry, is to saturate a little the color by clicking this button, where you can decrease the maximum level of the color to emphasize a little bit better. Now the maximum is 10, so whatever is above 10 will be the same red, to clearly show you this circadian pattern or this qualitative assessment. Last point worth to be mentioned, you see sometimes there are a white spot like this one. I'm showing you right now. What is white? White means that the cage has been extracted, so not inserted in the rack, so there are no data. For the time being, it is out of the rack. There are no data, no color, no blue, no red, and nothing in between, simply because there are no data. And once it is back, the cage start producing data. You see this big, I was lucky to show you one very evident event. You see after this insertion, there is a long stripe of red color. Most likely, here in Mario Negri, they performed a bedding change in this moment. The cage was out for a while. Then when it was back, hyperactivity induced by the task was clearly shown here in the heat map visualization. Time, as usual, is running very, very fast. I would like to conclude by showing you probably the last but very, very important part, that is the download section. There are, if you click, now the button is cleared. If you click this button, there are three different ways of downloading data. You can download, and I use, let's do easier, I use my slides. So you can download the data by selecting the first type, called type 1, and basically the data are exploded vertically. You have relative time, absolute time as a reference, aggregated by minute, by hour, following your selection. And then you have the name of the group, and you have the first cage in this group, and then the 12 electrodes as a data points if the metric is allowing you. If you selected the running wheel, obviously there are no 12 electrodes, there is only one column. If you selected the RDI, there is only one column. But if you selected, for instance, the animal locomotion index, you can also explode the 12, you have the 12 electrodes exploded vertically timestamp by timestamp, minute by minute, or hour by hour following your aggregation period. The middle download section is exactly the same, but very, very useful in case there are very long period of analysis, because it generates one file for each cage and each metric. So if I select this, I will get 6 files with the animal locomotion index, while here I had 1 file with the 6 cages within. Last, the type 2, the bottom one, the one on the lower choice, the data are kind of simply statistically analyzed, because instead of exploding the data vertically, we are also exploding horizontally. And we have the relative and absolute time, but then we have the group data. We have the standard error of the mean and the quartile of the group. And then we have the first cage, second cage, third cage of the group. And we keep going horizontally, if there is a second group, again, the data point of the group, the standard error, the quartile of the group, and then the cages belonging to the second group, and so on. If you have multiple groups, everything is exploded horizontally, while in the previous download section, everything is exploded vertically. You have the first group, first cage, first group, second cage, and proceeding vertically, so on. Second group, first cage, second group, second cage, and so on. Very, very different approach. They are both valid. Obviously, from type 1, you can reconstruct type 2, while from type 2, you cannot reconstruct type 1, because you don't have the granularity of the electrode, but you have already the data aggregated following your selection. What I want to show you again, show you more, is related to the fact that you can also select multiple metrics, as said, but it depends on the chart. For instance, it doesn't work to select multiple metrics with the heat maps. And you see, again, the triangle, you must be back to available charts for multiple metrics. And now, for instance, I'm back to the line. Aggregation, in this section, again, I'm back to the line, so must be the starting point, none. Again, I like, for instance, the events, and now everything is clear and I can visualize. Probably is my minute that is too much, sorry. Let's go to the hour, because the continuous line by minute for several days becomes almost incredible to be understood. And these are the different metrics. You remember I selected bedding, locomotion index smoothed, running wheel rotation, and distance, all displayed with a different section, all of them. Very, very simple. So more than deepening the different configuration, obviously my really suggestion for you, as a rule of thumb, I said, whenever you have a triangle, please carefully check the triangle, because there is something stopping you to proceed. And the system is really following you by suggesting what you can do or you cannot do, depending on your previous selection. The workflow is from top to bottom, is from cages to the filter, and you can see by following this step-by-step approach the different triangle you can fix. One last point that usually it's a common question from the audience, or at least from the user, is about the advanced functionalities. I see, for instance, I can use this one. So we have, for instance, in the metric section, when you select animal locomotion index and you click on the button, you see you can select the electrodes, but there is also a new advanced functionality that is called frontality. If you click frontality, it applies the animal locomotion index considering the next approach. The frontal electrodes, this is the mathematical formula, divided by the average of the frontal and the rear, basically divided by the board itself. So this metric, if I click in this way, that is an advanced option, and then let's have a look, is by hour. Let's do only the locomotion roll. Sorry. This metric is telling you, I put the background, sorry. Basically tells you if and how much the animals are active in the frontal electrode versus the entire board. If they change or there is a specific pattern of behavior, they are much more on the dark side, on the rear side of the cage, this frontality will be 0. The higher it is, the higher the move in the frontal electrode versus the entire board. This is a nice advanced feature. There is another one now working more on the temporal approach that is called the diurnality. And diurnality, it is under, so let's move back to the standard one, plus now I select the diurnality, sorry, here. The diurnality feature is an advanced one. The aggregation, considering the day as a diurnal approach, cannot be the hour. So the minimum aggregation in this case is the day. And diurnality as a mathematical formula basically is the light period. So the average of the light multiplied by the sample of the light divided the light plus the dark, therefore the entire day period. And so in this case, it's 1 point that obviously tells you how much they are active during the day versus the entire day, versus basically the night. If they are not active at all during the day, this will be 0. If they start becoming more active during the day, this will increase. So last point, obviously I cannot cover every functionality. I hope in the meantime you had questions with Stefano. And even more, obviously, we are here available to deepen, also case by case, individual. I hope I was clear enough, and I stop sharing and double check with Stefano if there is any specific question. Stefano?
Yep. So I've addressed most of the question.
Thanks.
So there were a question where you were talking about what is the difference between the animal locomotion index and the smoothed. For those that didn't read it, so the original one was the animal locomotion index, and essentially for how the system works, we generate small microelectromagnetic fields at 250 milliseconds. If there is a drop in the signal, it's essentially a count, and then we essentially sum up for the time being of if you bring it up, correct, the number of counts for the 12 electrodes, and then time point by time point. There we then apply a threshold, correct, and if it is above a certain noise, then you get the percentage activation. What we do with the animal locomotion index essentially is doing a rolling average of 4 samples instead of having 1 by 1, and that allows us to have a non-integer threshold, which can be does not have to be 1 or 2, can be also in between, and therefore is more sensible, and is also less noise sensitive, and therefore we suggest that from the last, I think, 3 years and onwards, and all the diagonality, frontality, and everything else is calculated on this parameter. When you download the data, the file is called edge because it was originally called like that, and we will change it potentially at some point in the future. And that's what you would have to look for.
Exactly. And you are remembering me one very important point, Stefano. Thanks for the question, which came from the audience. If it is not really needed for historical purposes and so on, we suggest not just to move to the locomotion index smoothed, as Stefano said, well applied since now years to also our advanced metrics, RDI and others. But we would like even to disable this button functionality to your interface. It stays in the background, but you cannot have the opportunity to click on it because it will disappear. So we would like to do it simply because this is much robust and stronger, and we don't want you to make a mistake on selecting the old one. In case you are using or you want to compare test with very old data where only the animal locomotion index was available, please obviously write to us. We will enable only for you this button. But for all the others, really for not making mistakes, or not a mistake, but to have better and more robust results, we will enable, we will leave you only the smoothed from the next days.
Okay. There are other few questions. One was a technical one, and I told them that they cannot visualize some data onwards for the animal tracking distance, and I told them to contact us because we can take it offline. There was another question regarding if we do stats within the analytics, and the answer is no. We just report the descriptive statistics, which is mean plus SEM or interquartile. If you want to do stats, you have to do it outside, though we have a service of data analysis that we can offer. It's not for free, and depends on your study. We can also perform stats and also other type of analysis. So contact us if you're interested. So then there was another one with regarding to if we have cages that are terminated, cages still ongoing, but they have different time point. I can compare them by, realigning them all together, and the answer is yes.
As we discussed, by resources, if they
correct.
belong to the same group, or by group if they belong to different groups.
And then there is a question always come about the animal number, if it can be different animal numbers in the cage. So we wrote a manual about the study design, which is more like how you would approach it and how you would solve the problem, because it can be two things. So you have either different n number into your cage. So first of all, the conditions should be similar across the cages. So if you have running wheel, for instance, it should be a running wheel across all cages, even the control animals, because you can have blocked running wheel, so with a screw, because otherwise the usage of the plate will be different, and therefore we suggest to have blocked running wheel. Second could be that you have different numerosity in the cage. You can actually kind of normalize those. We suggest in this document how to do that. But if in the course of the study, some animals are dying and therefore the number of animals is decreasing, we also hear some suggestion of how to deal with the data. So there are some ways to deal with it, but it's not easy. And then there was another question regarding, let's see. So, so Norman, I think I replied to your question. And there was a question about if after husbandry mice are more active, and if we are comparing results from various cages in different groups, is there a way to know when the cage were changed? Yes. So we have a button that calls event that it tells you exactly when was the cage changed and which cage was changed and where the animals went from position to position, so you can track it down. It's a file called event, which is along with the other file when you download the data, and you can find all of this information. And then there is the question also, is there a way to track the mortality in group house mice cage? Does the system detect it? It's a tricky question because it depends how the animals behave as compared to the, let's say that the mouse dies and the other one move normally. You would be able to do that, but typically there is something that, the animal are very social. They kind of talk to each other. And if an animal is dying, they are can be like crazy. Other strain can be like completely not moving. So it depends really on the number of animals in the cage, when it happens, and when you see it. We have some algorithms that says that in 90% of the cases we can detect it if it happened during the night. But again, it doesn't tell you the mouse has died. It tells you there was a change in the activity. Right. Is there any other question? So we will make as George already mentioned, the recording available to everyone. If you have a specific question regarding your study design, you want to know about your analysis of data and everything else, you can always, we have on our website, the way of booking myself or Giorgio or Guido, and you can ask specific question, like in a dedicated session to you. And that's what I typically do with many customer. And right, is there a way to track tremor? So tremor depends how the animals actually are shaking, and if they're single house or group house. In group house condition, I would say no. In single house condition, we have to see. It's very depending of the type of tremor. Yeah, and George, in the meanwhile, wrote the website that there is a button, and you can book with us a session. We can look at your data, re-explain everything, and go through your data with myself or Giorgio.
Yeah.
Another question, is it a better way to use a water bottle or auto watering system? This is for Giorgio.
Is it better to use one? No, there is no answer. This is more related to your internal workflow procedure and approach of the matter. They are both good for providing water. These are two different complementary water systems.
Let's reverse the point. If there is spillage from the water as compared to the auto watering system, the auto watering system will flood the cage very quickly, and we can typically detect it 100%. It's very quick.
Yeah,
and we can tell you with an alert that outside of this platform that something has happened.
In both cases, the DVC is obviously with specific algorithm detecting the water bottle flooding or the valve leakages.
Okay. Is there any further question? Everything was clear. George,
really?
you did a great job. Yes,
no,
you did
it's
a
not
great
true.
job. Or people are simply shy. Thank you. So Anastasia said thank you. That means that you did a good job. Guys, if there is no further question, I think we can stop at this. Again, we will share the link to those that were there. And if there are questions, you can come to a website. You can really book our time.
I show you how to do it. It is very, very simple. So you go on our website, digitalcage-tecniplast.com.
And at the bottom, there is the one-to-one consultation.
This is a free one-to-one consultation. And you can select myself, Guido, or Stefano, depending on the different topics. And you have access directly to our calendar, book
and it's free of charge. I mean, I typically suggest that to actually contact us prior doing the study and not after the study, because we can help in study designing so that we know what works, what didn't, what has been done, what hasn't worked, and we can really help you out in that respect. So with that, we'd like to thank you. Thank you, Sky, for having organized the session. Thank you, Giorgio, for having talked for 1 hour and 10 minutes. And wish you a very nice morning, afternoon, evening, depends where you are in the world. Okay.
Stay well. Bye-bye.